Imagine a monster hiding in plain sight, not lurking in shadows, but walking among us, briefcase in hand, a smile on his face. For over 2 decades, the quiet shores of Long Island held a secret, a graveyard of broken lives, discarded like forgotten relics along Ocean Parkway. 11 bodies, maybe more, their stories silenced by a killer who thrived on anonymity. Until July 14, 2023, when the mask slipped, and a name emerged from the darkness, Rex Heuermann. A New York architect, a husband, a father. And, prosecutors say, a serial killer. It began with a disappearance. Shannon Gilbert, a 24-year-old escort, vanishing into the night on May 1, 2010, after a frantic 911 call, "They're trying to kill me." Her body, found months later in a marsh near Oak Beach, sparked a search that uncovered something far worse. 4 women, Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, Amber Costello, and Maureen Brainerd Barnes, all wrapped in burlap sacks, laid out in a grim row along the highway. The Gilgo 4, as they'd come to be known. But the discoveries didn't stop there. 6 more sets of remains, some dating back to the 1990s, turned Gilgo Beach into a haunting enigma, a puzzle that baffled investigators for years. Fast forward to 2023. In a sleepy neighborhood just miles from Gilgo Beach, a man lived a double life. Rex Heuermann, 59, was no drifter or recluse. He was a Manhattan architect, a fixture in Midtown's bustling corridors, with a firm he'd founded in 1994. To neighbors, he was the quiet guy in a suit, commuting to the city with a briefcase. To his family, wife Asa Ellerup and 2 grown children, he was a provider. But beneath the facade, investigators say, lurked a predator. A man who meticulously planned murders, wielded burner phones like weapons, and left DNA breadcrumbs that would eventually betray him. On July 14, 2023, Heuermann was arrested outside his Fifth Avenue office, a bombshell that shattered the silence of a case gone cold. Charged with the murders of the Gilgo 4, he pleaded not guilty. But by February 2025, the net tightened. 2 more victims, Jessica Taylor and Sandra Costilla, were linked to him, their deaths stretching the timeline back to 1993. The evidence? DNA from a pizza crust he tossed in a Manhattan trash can, burner phone records, and a chilling familiarity with the lonely stretch of Ocean Parkway. This is the story of how a 20-year mystery unraveled, and the man at its center. Rex Heuermann didn't fit the stereotype of a serial killer. No shadowy figure in a hooded jacket, no loner scribbling manifestos in a basement. He was a professional, a man who navigated zoning laws and blueprints with the same precision he allegedly applied to his crimes. Born in 1963, Heuermann grew up on Long Island, a local boy who knew its backroads and beaches like the lines on his drafting table. Colleagues described him as meticulous, even arrogant, a stickler for detail in a career where inches mattered. But those same traits, prosecutors allege, made him a master of evasion. The Gilgo Beach killings weren't a sudden spree. They were a slow burn, a nightmare unfolding over decades. The first known victim tied to Heuermann, Jessica Taylor, vanished in 2003. A sex worker in her 20s, her dismembered torso was found along Ocean Parkway, her head and hands dumped miles away in Manaville, an early sign of a killer refining his craft. Then came the Gilgo 4, killed between 2007 and 2010, their bodies wrapped in burlap, a signature as deliberate as it was macabre. Maureen Brainerd Barnes, 25, disappeared in 2007. Melissa Barthelemy, 24, in 2009. Megan Waterman, 22, and Amber Costello, 27, in 2010. All escorts, all lured by a promise of cash, all silenced. For years, the case dragged on. The burlap yielded little, no fingerprints, no DNA to match. But technology caught up. In 2022, a task force revisited the evidence with fresh eyes. A hair found on Megan Waterman's body, previously untested, matched mitochondrial DNA from Heuermann's wife, Asa Ellerup. It wasn't conclusive, but it narrowed the lens. Then came the burner phones, dozens of them, pinging near the victim's last known locations and Hoyerman's home. The clincher. A pizza crust he discarded in January 2023, its DNA a perfect match to a hair on Amber Costello. The architect's appetite had betrayed him. That home, a ramshackle split level on First Avenue, became the case's dark heart. Neighbors called it an eyesore, its faded red exterior and cluttered yard a stark contrast to Hoyerman's polished city persona. But what lay inside was worse. In August 2023, police revealed a bombshell, a soundproofed basement, a dungeon with locks and restraints. Was this where he planned his kills? Or where he relived them? The house, now a crime scene, whispered secrets of a man unmasked. The house on First Avenue wasn't just a residence, it was a vault of secrets. When Suffolk County Police descended in July 2023, they didn't just find a family home. They uncovered a chilling tableau, over 200 firearms, many unregistered, stashed in a basement vault. Knives, restraints, and a collection of disturbing pornography, some depicting bondage and torture, piled up like pieces of a grotesque puzzle. But the basement's soundproofing stood out most, a feature so unusual it sent shivers through investigators. Was it a lair where Rex Hoyerman held his victims? Or a sanctuary where he escaped into his darkest fantasies? The search lasted weeks. Neighbors watched in disbelief as hazmat-suited officers carted out evidence bags by the dozen. Hoyerman's family, his wife Asa, daughter Victoria, and stepson Christopher, were nowhere to be found. Asa filed for divorce days after his arrest, fleeing with the kids to an undisclosed location. Friends said she was blindsided, claiming she'd been away during the murders, often visiting her native Iceland or family upstate. But her hair, unwittingly left on a victim, tied her to the case, at least genetically. Did she know nothing, as she insisted, or was she too close to see the monster beside her? Hoyerman's proximity to the crime scenes was no coincidence. Just 10 miles from Gilgo Beach, his home sat in a nexus of highways and backroads, a perfect staging ground. He knew the terrain, the tides, the quiet stretches where bodies could vanish into the dunes. Prosecutors say he targeted sex workers, women society often overlooked, contacting them via burner phones and Craigslist ads. The calls were calculated, brief, untraceable, often made from Midtown Manhattan near his office. He'd drive them to Long Island, they alleged, killing them in a ritualistic fury, then dumping them like trash along Ocean Parkway. A criminologist testified, this wasn't impulsive. The burlap, the dismemberment, the spacing of the bodies, it's a signature. He evolved, learning to cover his tracks. But every killer slips, eventually. That slip came in waves. Beyond the pizza crust DNA, investigators found taunting calls Hoyerman allegedly made to Melissa Barthelomy's family in 2009, using her own phone, his voice distorted, gloating about her death. Cell tower data placed him in Midtown during those calls, a stone's throw from his office. Then there were the searches, thousands of them, on his computers, Gilgo Beach case updates, serial killer profiles, even, how to dispose of a body. He wasn't just killing. He was studying himself, watching the world chase a ghost he thought he'd buried. It's the little things that undo a killer. A slice of pizza, casually thrown away on a cold January day in 2023, became the source of Rex Hoyerman's downfall. Suffolk County's task force, revitalized in 2022 under DA Ray Tierney, had been tailing him for months. They'd watched his routines, commuting from Massapequa Park to his Midtown office, a man blending into the city's rhythm. That pizza crust, swabbed from a public bin, carried his DNA, a match to a hair found on Amber Costello's burlap-wrapped body. It was the break they'd waited 13 years for, a thread that unraveled 2 decades of terror. The district attorney, Tierney, said, "This is a significant step toward justice for the victims and their families. We believe Rex Hoyerman is responsible for these heinous crimes, and we will prove it." The arrest hit like a thunderclap. July 14, 2023, Hoyerman, cuffed outside his Fifth Avenue office, towered over officers at 6 feet 4 inches, his face a mask of defiance. Charged with 3 murders initially, Costello, Waterman, and Barthélemy, he was linked to Brainerd Barnes days later. The Gilgo Four, once faceless statistics in a cold case, now had a name to curse. But the case didn't stop there. By February 2025, prosecutors expanded the indictment. Jessica Taylor, killed in 2003, and Sandra Costilla, a 1993 victim found in North Sea, joined the list. Partial remains, burlap traces, and more DNA, some from Hoyerman's daughter's discarded soda can, painted a portrait of a killer active for at least 30 years. The Gilgo Beach mystery wasn't just about the four. 11 sets of remains surfaced between 2010 and 2011, some unidentified, some dismembered, some predating Hoyerman's known timeline. A Jane Doe from 1997. A toddler and her mother. A man in women's clothing. Were they all his? Investigators aren't sure. The beach became a dumping ground, a macabre gallery of lost lives. Hoyerman's charges cover 6, but whispers persist. Could he be the Long Island serial killer, tying every body to one hand? Or was Gilgo a crossroads for multiple predators? We chased leads for years, Johns, drifters, even cops. Hoyerman was never on our radar. A guy like that, suit, tie, family. You don't see it coming, said the lead detective on the case. That invisibility was his shield. Hoyerman lived a dual existence, architect by day, hunter by night. His wife's absences, documented trips in 2007, 2009, 2010, aligned with the Gilgo Four's murders, giving him windows of solitude. His searches for bondage porn and true crime synced with a mind obsessed, not just with killing, but with controlling the narrative. Until the narrative turned on him. Gilgo Beach wasn't just a crime scene, it was a graveyard of lost chances. 11 bodies, 11 stories, stretching back to the 1990s. The Gilgo Four tied to Rex Hoyerman were only part of the tapestry. Jessica Taylor and Sandra Costilla extended his reign of terror, but the others, a Jane Doe from 1997, a toddler and her mother, an Asian male in women's clothing, remained question marks. Were they his too, or did Ocean Parkway hide more than one killer? For years, theories swirled, a rogue cop, a fisherman, a John with a grudge. Hoyerman's arrest didn't close the book, it cracked it wider. It all started with Shannon Gilbert. Her disappearance in May 2010 wasn't linked to Hoyerman. Officially, she drowned in a marsh, a tragic accident after fleeing a client's home. But her 911 call, 22 minutes of terror, begging for help, lit the fuse. Her body, found in December 2011, led police to the Gilgo Four, then the rest. Her mother, Mari, fought for answers until her own murder in 2016 by Shannon's sister, a twisted footnote to the saga. Shannon's death wasn't Hoyerman's doing, but it unearthed his alleged crimes, a cruel irony that haunts her family still. That burlap wasn't just a shroud, it was a clue. Coarse, practical, tied to landscaping or construction, it pointed to someone with resources. Hoyerman, an architect who dealt with contractors, fit the bill. His firm, RH Consultants, handled projects across New York, schools, offices, permits filed with surgical care. Did he source the sacks from a job site? Did he wrap his victims with the same hands that drew city skylines? The precision of the dismemberments, Taylor's severed limbs, Costilla's clean cuts, suggested a man who knew tools, who saw bodies as projects to dismantle. Gilgo's isolation was Hoyerman's ally. A ribbon of road flanked by dunes and scrub, it swallowed secrets whole. He allegedly struck when his wife was away, summer 2007 for Brainerd Barnes, July 2009 for Barthélemy, June and September 2010 for Waterman and Costello. The toddler and her mother, found in 2011, remain a mystery, victims of a different hand, or a chapter Hoyerman hasn't confessed to. As of March 2025, his trial looms, but the beach still whispers, how many more are out there, waiting to be found? By March 2025, Rex Heuermann's trial was a storm brewing on Long Island's horizon. 6 murder charges: Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, Amber Costello, Jessica Taylor, and Sandra Costilla, formed a noose of evidence tightening around him. Prosecutors painted a portrait of a predator who'd honed his craft over 30 years, from the crude killing of Costilla in 1993 to the calculated disposal of the Gilgo 4. DNA, burner phones, taunting calls, and that damning planning document were their pillars. But Heuermann's defense fought back, calling it a house of cards built on coincidence and desperation. This is a rush to judgment. Hairs from a family home don't mean murder. Burner phones? Anyone can use them. My client's an architect, not a monster. The defense leaned hard on reasonable doubt. Asa Ellerup's hairs on the victims? She lived with him, shedding was inevitable. The pizza crust DNA? A single sample, they argued, easily contaminated. The basement dungeon? A collector's quirk, not a torture chamber. Those 200 guns were legal hobbies, the restraints props from a past life. And the planning document, a typed list of supplies and cleanup, could have been a work memo, they claimed, misconstrued by a zealous prosecution. But the jury would have to wrestle with Heuermann's searches. Why don't some serial killers get caught? A question too pointed to dismiss. For the families, the trial wasn't about doubt, it was about justice delayed. Melissa Barthelemy's mother, Lynn, still heard her daughter's voice in those taunting calls, a wound reopened with every courtroom day. Megan Waterman's daughter, Lily, now a teenager, grew up without a mother's touch. Amber Costello's sister spoke of her twins' lost light. These women weren't just names on a charge sheet, they were daughters, sisters, stolen by a man who saw them as prey. The Gilgo 4's discovery in 2010 had bonded their families in sorrow. Heuermann's arrest gave them a target for their rage. But the trial's shadow stretched beyond the 6. The other Gilgo remains, unnamed, unclaimed, haunted the proceedings. Could Heuermann account for the toddler, her mother, the 1997 Jane Doe? Prosecutors hinted at more charges, teasing a web of killings that might never fully untangle. His architectural mind, used to map buildings, had mapped a killing ground instead, they argued. Ocean Parkway wasn't random, it was his canvas. And as testimony loomed, one question burned: would he take the stand, or let silence speak for him? Ocean Parkway wasn't just a dumping ground, it was Rex Heuermann's stage, a lonely stretch where he allegedly played God. As his trial neared in 2025, the prosecution leaned on more than DNA and phones. They had his life, a timeline of absences, obsessions, and a chilling intimacy with Long Island's underbelly. Heuermann wasn't a drifter or a transient, he was a local, a man who'd fished its waters, driven its roads, and known its secrets since childhood. That knowledge, they argued, made him the perfect phantom, until he wasn't. In court, a forensic analyst testified saying, "The burlaps weave matches commercial-grade sacks, used in landscaping, construction. Not rare, but not household either. It's deliberate." The burlap became a silent witness. Sourced, perhaps, from a site Heuermann knew through work, it wrapped his victims like a signature, practical yet personal. Jessica Taylor's 2003 killing showed evolution, her torso dumped on Gilgo, her head and hands in Manorville, 20 miles apart. By 2007, with Maureen Brainerd Barnes, he'd streamlined, whole bodies, burlap-bound, laid in a row. The Gilgo 4's proximity, within a quarter mile, suggested confidence, a killer who'd found his rhythm. Sandra Costilla's earlier death, less refined, hinted at a beginner's hand. 3 decades, one thread, control. How did he do it? Prosecutors say Heuermann used his green Chevy Avalanche, a vehicle neighbors knew well, to transport bodies under cover of night. His wife's trips, often summer getaways, left him free to hunt. Craigslist ads lured the women, burner phones sealed the deal. The planning document detailed it all: gloves, rope, check tides. He'd strike, kill, likely by strangulation, per autopsies, then dumped them where the dunes would hide his work. But the taunts to Melissa's family broke the pattern, arrogance overriding caution, a crack in his armor. Betrayal came in layers. His daughter's soda can, tossed curbside, carried DNA tying back to a victim's hair. His own trash, pizza crusts, coffee cups, built the case brick by brick. The basement, with its soundproofing and arsenal, suggested a workshop for his crimes, though no blood was found. Neighbors recalled oddities, late-night drives, a man who rarely mingled. One saw him hauling large bags once, thought it was yard waste. Now, they wonder. As trial testimony began, Hoyerman sat stone-faced, a giant unraveling in real time, his legacy shifting from blueprints to body counts. March 2025 marked a turning point. As Rex Hoyerman's trial unfolded in Riverhead, the prosecution didn't just present evidence, they told a story. The Chevy Avalanche, spotted near Gilgo Beach in blurry traffic cam footage, became a steel thread linking him to the dump sites. Witnesses, neighbors, co-workers, described a man who thrived on routine yet harbored a shadow life. One colleague recalled Hoyerman boasting about hunting, skinning deer with precision. He liked the control, she said. That control, prosecutors argued, bled into his alleged murders, a ritual of dominance played out on Ocean Parkway. His digital footprint was a prosecutor's goldmine. Over 200 searches on the Gilgo case, dozens more on serial killers, Ted Bundy, BTK, mixed with pornographic queries about torture and rape. How to avoid leaving DNA at a crime scene. Soundproofing a basement. Each click was a glimpse into a mind consumed, a killer tracking his own echo. The planning document, recovered from a wiped hard drive, listed body prep and disposal, a checklist so clinical it chilled the courtroom. Hoyerman's defense called it fiction, a macabre draft for a novel. But paired with the burlap and DNA, it read like a roadmap to murder. Asa Ellerup's role hung like fog over the trial. Her mitochondrial DNA on 3 victims suggested proximity, not guilt, hairs likely transferred via Hoyerman's clothes or car. She'd been in Iceland during Megan Waterman's 2010 murder, upstate for others. Divorce papers filed post-arrest painted her as shattered, not suspicious. Yet whispers persisted, how could she miss the guns, the late nights, the man unraveling beside her? Her children, Victoria and Christopher, faced their own reckoning. DNA from Victoria's soda can tied to a victim didn't mean she knew, but it tethered them to his shadow. The house on First Avenue became a symbol, a dungeon in suburbia, its secrets spilling out. No blood stained its floors, but the soundproofed vault, the restraints, the arsenal spoke volumes. Prosecutors theorized he killed elsewhere, perhaps a secondary site, then brought trophies home. A neighbor's tip about a backyard incinerator, unconfirmed, fueled speculation. As testimony piled up, Hoyerman remained silent, his not guilty plea a wall against the tide. But the families of the Gilgo 4, Jessica Taylor, and Sandra Costilla watched, waiting for the verdict that might finally name their tormentor. As March 2025 fades, Rex Hoyerman's fate rests with 12 jurors in a Riverhead courtroom. 6 murders pinned to his name, Maureen, Melissa, Megan, Amber, Jessica, Sandra, form a chain of evidence forged by DNA, phones, and his own meticulous mind. If Hoyerman is convicted, this will be his epitaph, not an architect of buildings, but of a graveyard along Ocean Parkway. If acquitted, the mystery deepens, Gilgo Beach still holding its breath, its ghosts unavenged. Either way, his arrest cracked a 20-year silence, forcing us to ask, how many monsters walk among us, unseen? As the gavel waits to fall, Gilgo Beach remains a testament, to the lost, the overlooked, the hunted. Rex Hoyerman may answer for 6, but the sand still whispers of others. A mystery solved, or a chapter closed too soon. The truth, like the tide, keeps shifting. For now, we watch. We wait. And we remember. It's been another edition of True Crime Stories. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next one. Like this video, comment below and share.